My Govanen. Welcome to Tolkien Lore Channel. I'm the Tolkien Geek, and continuing my Silmarillion Synopsis series, today I'm going to cover the Chapter 8 of the Quenta Silmarillion of the Darkening of Valinor. Now, in the previous chapter, if you read the full thing, there's actually a reference to people thinking that the light of the trees seemed a little bit dim when Melkor escaped, and it's not quite sure whether that was meant metaphorically or literally, but it's not nearly the same as what happens in this chapter, so let's get started. The chapter leads off with Manwë kind of determining, well, it looks like Melkor's probably going back to his old strongholds in the northern part of Middle-earth, so we're going to, kind of strengthen our defenses in the north and, really set a watch out in that area. But it turns out Melkor, in fact, goes to the south, to a region on the continent of Aman called Avathar. You have to remember, Aman is the name of the continent on which Valinor is, but Valinor really only is the area behind the mountains that the Valar piled up as a defense against Melkor. So there's an area beyond the mountains, both in the north and the south, and the southern area is where Melkor's going. So he goes to the south, and there he finds Ungoliant. Now, Ungoliant, it tells us, we don't really know exactly where she comes from or what her origins are, but some have said, which is basically a way of saying this is our best theory and we're going with it, that she was originally one of the Maiar that Melkor corrupted, much, much earlier in the history of Ea, the universe, basically, and came with him whenever he kind of invaded Arda much earlier in the story, but that she kind of disowned him, wanting to be her own master, and kind of avoided the whole conflict with the Valar because she didn't want to end up like Melkor and decided to just kind of set up on her own. So she goes to the south of the continent of Aman, which has always been kind of not really looked after because their vigilance was always to the north where Melkor was, in Middle-earth anyway. He wasn't on the continent of Aman, but same principle, they're looking north, so she goes south. And it says that she took the form of a spider, and being a rather strange paradox almost, she wants light and basically devours it, but she also hates light. But it tells us that she basically kind of sucked up all the light that there was in the southern part of Aman that she could get, on that side of the mountains. And from the consumption of light, she ends up weaving webs of darkness. And so it's like she sucks in light and turns it into dark webs. And, well, you can kind of probably see where this is going. This is Shelob's ancestor, or mother, really, I think, direct ancestor. So she's kind of down there on her own. Melkor finds her, and she's as close to Valinor as she wants to get already because she doesn't really want to risk going in. Melkor starts plotting his revenge with her, but then when she realizes what it is he wants to do, which it doesn't tell us what that is yet exactly, she's like, I ain't going back into Valinor, that's too dangerous. And he says, look, just go along with me, and if what we accomplish doesn't satisfy you, then I'll reward you still more with both hands. That's a significant phrase that will come up later, even though it seems like just a proverbial or idiomatic expression. It actually means something, so hang on to that thought until we get to later in the story. But then they finally do decide to go to Valinor. In order to aid their effort, Ungoliant weaves a web of, or a cloak, it actually uses the word cloak, of what it calls unlight. It's not just a lack of light, it's almost like a physical expression of darkness such that you can't pierce it. Light doesn't really illuminate it. And she climbs up to the tallest mountain in the southern regions, builds kind of a rope ladder for Melkor to follow, and he looks out over Valinor. And it tells us, as kind of an aside, that this is a time of festival. And as an aside to the aside, it kind of goes into this thing about how there aren't really any seasons yet because there's no sun and moon yet. You may remember that. But Yavanna had made it so that plants and things kind of did things in seasonal spurts. So this was like kind of the gathering of the harvest type period, and there was a festival going on, and so almost everybody was gathered into, Valinor for the celebration of this festival. And Melkor, of course, was aware of this, and that's kind of why he planned his attack for this point. And it's significant too because at this festival, Manwë had decided that this was when he was going to try to, get everybody reconciled from the whole falling out of Feanor and Fingolfin and all that stuff. So he's got Feanor and Fingolfin there. Everybody was invited. But for some reason, well, it tells us the reason. Basically, the only one of the elves from where Feanor was banished that came was Feanor. His father didn't, and the other elves that kind of lived there with him didn't either. Feanor was the only one that came, and Finwë basically said, until my son Feanor is released, I hold myself unkinged. Makes you wonder if he's just a little bit too attached to Feanor, or maybe that may be part of the problem for some of the things that have happened. So you can see that kind of still in the background. But at any rate, Fingolfin and Feanor come before the seat of Manwë, and basically Fingolfin says, as I said I would do, back when the judgment was pronounced, I do now. I release Feanor for what he did to me. And he also follows this up with a statement saying, half brother by blood, but full brother in heart will I be. You will lead and I will follow. And Feanor basically just says, I hear you, so be it. And so, I mean, that becomes significant later on as well. But the main thing here is they do reconcile, and at this point it seems like everything's fine. While all this is going on, though, Melkor and Ungoliant steal into Valinor, and they make their way to the trees. And Melkor takes a spear or sword. Now, for some reason, my mind just blanked on which it was. But he basically punctures both of the trees, and Ungoliant starts to suck up all the sap, which is basically light, that comes out of the trees. And so the trees die. I mean, not only did Melkor stab him, but Ungoliant has venom in her mouth, so the trees just wither and die. And now we have the darkening of Valinor, and what follows is kind of the last attempt to do anything about it. Now, even after sucking up all the light from the trees, Ungoliant is still hungering for more light, and so the vats that were kept off to the side, gathering the dew and whatnot that came from the trees, she drains them as well. And doesn't happen in this chapter, but remember how I mentioned that Melkor said he would, reward her with both hands later? This doesn't satisfy her either, and in the next bit we're gonna, or well, whenever that comes up again, I can't remember if it's in the next chapter right off the top of my head, but this will come up again, and that both hands thing will become very important. So remember that for further on. But basically, Ungoliant is just sucking up all this light and getting really, 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 really big. So big that even Melkor is worried. And remember, he's supposed to be the mightiest being in Arda. So that's happening. Meanwhile, back in Valinor, the Valar and the elves and the Maiar, they see that the light is fading, and the next thing you know, basically Valinor is pretty much just shrouded in darkness. And not just darkness, but there's also Ungoliant in this period is also belching up darkness as well. So I mean, like, basically there's kind of a fog covering Valinor as well, and the holy mountains of Taniquetil, where Manwë and Varda have their abode, is like the only thing left. And then nobody can really see what's going on, but Manwë, who is the most farsighted, he can see piercing all the darkness except the unlight that it told us that Ungoliant had covered her and herself and Melkor with. He can't pierce that, but Manwë sees it, and he recognizes as it's fleeing northward that Melkor has come and gone, and basically now it's the seeing this, he kind of lets the Valar know, and Orome and Tulkas and some others, they start off to try to go find him, but in the darkness they can't really do anything, and it comes to nothing. And now Valinor has been darkened. So that's the end of that chapter, which is one of the most cliffhanger-ish endings that Tolkien gives us in the Silmarillion, because it kind of leaves us not really with any kind of resolution or any real end point, but the next chapter will pretty much follow heavily on it and cover a lot of what happens afterward. And like I said, keep in mind that phrase, repay with both hands. That will become very significant earlier. They haven't finished doing what they're going to do in Valinor, Melkor, and Ungoliant, that is, and they will cause more trouble. But for now, that's the end of this chapter, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something. If you know anybody else who's trying to get through the Silmarillion but just can't quite manage it or doesn't really know what's going on, do let them know about this series so they can kind of maybe pick it up whatever they're missing. If you like the video, please do give it a thumbs up and share it around. You can also follow me on JRRT Lore on Twitter, and you can support the channel at the Patreon link in the description below. You can also subscribe, of course, over here and find a couple of my previous videos here. And until next time, I'm the Tolkien Geek signing out for the Tolkien Lore channel. Namaste.